again, Bio. A little more Mendelian genetics for you here. You guys already had video 1 where you looked at trait, allele, and gene. Hopefully you wrote a summary where you looked at some of your own traits, and we've had a chance to talk about those. Now I'm going to start talking about Punnett squares. I'm going to start showing you how do we show how traits are passed down from parents to offspring. This might end up taking 2 videos, so we'll have to see. This might end up being video 2A, but for your title, you guys can just call this right now. Let's call it video 2, Intro to Punnett Squares / Complete Dominance. So let's start with what a Punnett square is. First of all, do you remember this from middle school at all? Did you have to do this in middle school at all? Some of you may have. All right, so we'll see a little bit of review here. The first thing you really need to know about a Punnett square is that it's used to show the possible offspring. It's not going to show you exactly what's going to happen. Okay? It shows you the probability. Just like you guys may have heard some probabilities before, like you have a 2 million to 1 chance or something of winning the lottery. I'm totally making that up. That's what a Punnett square tells you, the probability or the possibility. It doesn't tell you exactly what's going to happen. In a Punnett square, if you remember, you've got 4 boxes, and these show you the possible offspring. They don't show you exactly what's going to happen if you have 4 babies. Down here in the example, make sure you guys write this down. It's going to show you 3 things. It's going to show you the P generation, the parents, which we're going to put on the outside. It's going to show you the F1 generation, which would be the children of this cross, the babies. The F2 generation would be like the grandkids. So if we were to do another generation, if we were to breed the F1s together, which you can do with pea plants, not with humans, all right? Probability. Just a reminder, you guys, of what probability is. Remember, probability is the likelihood that something's going to happen. I can't even tell you how many times people forget that a Punnett square does not show you exactly what's happening. It shows you the probability of what's going to happen, okay? All right. Sorry, let me head back to this real quick. Shows you the probability, not exactly what's going to happen. For example, when you flip a coin, you get a 50-50 chance of getting heads or tails. But that doesn't happen every single time you flip a coin. If I have you guys flip a coin 100 times, it's not always exactly going to be 50 heads and 50 tails. Maybe you guys end up with 52 heads and 48 tails, okay? It shows you the likelihood that something's going to happen, which is what a Punnett square does. Examples of Punnett squares for Mendel's stuff. So remember we talked about Mendel's traits and some of the alleles for his super fancy pea plants that he bred together. Okay, one would have been pod color. Okay, so the trait would be pod color, and the alleles for that would be green or yellow pods. And here you can see where he's crossed a green pea pod with a yellow pea pod. So this is a dominant yellow, and it's hiding a recessive green. Okay, why can we tell the green is recessive? Because it's a lowercase y. So you can see here in that breeding, he's got a probability 50% could be yellow, 50% could be green. Think of each box as 25, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this later. Other traits that he crossed, we've got flower color. You've got purple flowers and white flowers. Purple was the dominant one. And then here you've got 2 purple flowers that he was crossing, but they're hiding a gene for a white flower. So that's why you see them show up in this generation. Okay, so this was the P generation. These were the parents, and we got these baby flowers. Okay, so this is our F1. And then when we crossed F1, we got the F2 generation. So like the grandchildren flowers. Now, dominant and recessive alleles, you need to know what these 2 are. And I'm explaining these before I'm actually showing you guys the Punnett square so that you know what the capitals and the lowercase mean. Dominant allele. If a trait is dominant, it is the one that you are always going to see if it's there. I think of it like a bully, okay? If the dominant letter is there, that is the trait that is actually shown. It shows in your actual physical phenotype, which we're going to show later. Okay. Examples of a few that we may have talked about already. Free earlobes. Okay. If you have free earlobes, which most of us have, that's a dominant trait. You can show free earlobes, but you can be carrying or hiding the recessive one for attached. So just because you have free earlobes doesn't mean that all your kids are going to have free earlobes. Maybe you'll pass an attach down to them. Okay. The dominant allele is actually to inherit 6 fingers. Okay. So those of you who are born with 5 fingers, you are actually showing the recessive allele, okay? The only reason more of us aren't born with 6 fingers is because it's so rare for that dominant allele to be passed down. So if one person in a family is born with 6 fingers, it's very likely that they'll pass down the 6-finger trait to their kids. Okay, and that usually it's just one extra finger kind of coming off here, off of the pinky finger, and it's usually removed pretty quickly after the child's born. Widow's peak. If I talk to you guys about widow's peak, I have a widow's peak. There's my widow's peak right there. Okay, that's a dominant trait. And then in Mendel's P's, having a round seed coat was dominant. Recessive alleles. Recessive alleles always lose to the dominant allele. They always do. The dominant allele always bullies them. The only way that you're actually going to see them physically is if there's no dominant allele to bully them. Okay, so you got to have 2 lower cases to see a recessive allele. That's the lowercase letter. Now, in our discussion earlier, at the very beginning of the unit, I probably talked you through a few of these, but attached earlobes are recessive. So you got to have 2 lower cases to get attached earlobes. Having 5 fingers is 2 recessive. So most of us probably have 2 recessives. Having a straight hairline means that you've got 2 recessives. And then having wrinkled seeds in Mendel's P's would have been recessive. So that means all of these guys right here inherited only lowercase letters, no uppercases. Because remember, the uppercase always wins. It's the bully. Phenotype. Think phenotype, physical characteristics. That's why I have these PHs underlined, okay? Phenotype, physical characteristics. Phenotype is what I see. When I look at you and I see your hair color, your eye color, your height, okay? The shape of your fingers, the shape of your ears, the shape of your nose, any of those things, whether you have freckles or not, that's your phenotype. That's your physical characteristic, okay? Your phenotype can always be seen, but it doesn't always tell you exactly what your genes are, okay? That would be the next thing, which is called genotype. Genotype is your actual genetic makeup. I can't look at you guys and say, oh, you must be carrying a recessive for this. So, oh, I can tell that you have 2 dominants for this. If I figure out what your parents had, I could figure out your genotype, but I can't look at you necessarily and tell what your genotype is. All right. If I was carrying a recessive blonde trait, which I think I talked about in the first video, you couldn't necessarily look at me and say, oh, she must have a recessive blonde allele. Okay. You can only see my physical phenotype. Okay. You can't see my genotype. Let me check our time here, people. Okay. Now, when we create a genotype, we have 2 different terms to describe those genotypes. We have homozygous and heterozygous, okay? Remember, the prefix homo means same. That means the alleles are identical. It's either you either have homozygous dominant or you have homozygous recessive, okay? Looking at tall and short, I talk about this one a lot because Mendel's pea plants inherited tall and short genes. The tall gene is dominant and the short gene is recessive. Now, if you inherit one of both, that's heterozygous. Remember, hetero means different. You can still be a tall pea plant. You could inherit one tall gene from one parent and one recessive short gene from another that you are hiding, that you cannot see. We wouldn't know that that's there until we breed 2 pea plants together and see what happens in their offspring, okay? Homozygous identical, either identical uppercase, identical lowercase, or heterozygous, one uppercase, one lowercase. The green color of the pea pods, I believe, is also one that is dominant. So you could have a green pea pod that's hiding a yellow pea pod recessive gene, or carrying, if you're carrying a gene. Now, these words go with homozygous and heterozygous. They're just synonyms for them. The first one is true breeding. True breeding, think of it like another way to say homozygous. True breeding, they're only going to pass down the same traits to their offspring. So if we have a short pea plant, which remember would have been 2 lowercase t's, it's only going to pass down lowercase t's. If I have a tall pea plant that has 2 uppercase t's, it's homozygous dominant, only going to pass down those tall traits. So true breeding is another way of saying homozygous for us, right? And then another word for heterozygous would be hybrid. Hybrids are so fun to talk about. We'll talk about them in class. Think about what a hybrid animal is. We've got all kinds of hybrid animals where you have one kind of animal bred with another one. This is kind of the same concept. Hybrid would be heterozygous. It's the same as heterozygous. I'm going to stop the video right here because I'm almost running out of time, and we are going to start with another section of video 2 in a little bit.